Wow, where to begin? So it's been over 2 months since I filmed the book review video, and there's a very good reason for that. One of which is I was away doing something very extraordinary, which many of you are going to hear about, and probably it's going to be how a lot of you find this video. And secondly, during that time, I was trying to read Jane Austen for the first time. This is my first Jane Austen novel. I'm proud to say, at the ripe old age of 29, I managed to read Sense and Sensibility all by myself. And I'll be honest, I liked it more than I thought I would. I've always really wanted to read Austen and the Bronte sisters, but as a straight man, you feel like you need an alibi to read these books, which are normally left to girls' grammar schools, and I felt a bit kind of nervous reading this. It's not normally an anxiety that you probably hear about on the internet of men getting nervous about doing things which are normally for girls because they don't normally talk about it. But yep, I was pretty intimidated by starting this, but actually it's pretty enjoyable, it's pretty accessible. I can clearly see why I probably should have read this when I was younger, and why so many girls who are young tend to read this and love it, or are prescribed to read this, because it's really great life advice and it's very eye-opening. So let's get into the basics of what Sense and Sensibility is about, so I can tell you about my experience with it. This is my first Jane Austen novel, and it's her first complete novel too. And it's about marriage. It's about two sisters trying to marry to avoid poverty, but the men they want keep running away from them, and it's about them trying to court these men from a distance. And the reason I read this is because I asked Twitter for classic fiction which had dating advice, and they threw me this, so I just took it. So I really think this is a story about sisterhood, because Sense and Sensibility is referring to the two sisters in this story, Eleanor Dashwood and Marianne Dashwood. Eleanor Dashwood has sense, she is sensible. Marianne Dashwood has sensibility, which means she's emotional, she's reactive, she's sensitive. And these two sisters are almost like opposites. Eleanor's the eldest, she's wise. Marianne is the middle sister, and she is romantic and courageous. And ultimately, those are the two characters we need to focus on, and they're looking for men which suit them. Eleanor wants a man who is sensible like her. Someone called Edward, as we find out, is a bit like that. Whereas Marianne really wants a man who is cultured and also equally very passionate about singing and books and all the things that make her world very magical. She wants to share that with someone. So she's also looking for someone romantic and passionate and sensitive. I like to think the message of Sense and Sensibility is sisters before misters, because it's really how Eleanor and Marianne take care of one another in them striving to find their husband. That care is so essential for both of their journeys. It's almost like you can't make it alone. Like, love is a process where you're helped by people, and you need family first before you try and make family. And I find that seeing the book from that light is much more informative to me, and I found it a lot more instructive when I saw it from that way, rather than a romance novel. I thought this was going to be a romance novel with strong female characters, and it's almost the opposite. This is very against romance, and the female characters, Eleanor and Marianne Dashwood, are ultimately waiting around in peril to try and woo these men, and there's so little they can do because of the context in which this story is written. It's a time where women can have jobs and men could just ride away on horses, and you just wouldn't know when you'd see them again. It's a very different time. The story is fine, but like Charles Dickens, I find it sort of drags a lot in the middle. And it's not in such a way that's suspenseful. It's not something that keeps me on my toes. I'm kind of just happy when it's over. And it does end well, and it does start well, but it just drags for too long, like Dickens's novels. But the strength with Jane Austen that I find is she writes with the precision and wit of Oscar Wilde, and it's light-hearted. Although the themes are heavy, there's a lot of care and grace in the way that she expresses these ideas of how we need to find love and how we need to avoid heartbreak. It's done with a lot of care, and you can tell that Jane Austen takes Eleanor's view on marriage and love, even in the way that she expresses things in this novel because everything's done very lightly, which I think is what makes it great reading for younger readers. It's just able to be read by anyone despite being about quite serious things. It's lighthearted and it's not too severe and emotionally challenging. Although I will say I was very emotionally involved at the very beginning of this novel. When Marianne falls for Willoughby, I was very, very much on board with that. I actually had to stop reading this when Marianne started falling in love with Willoughby because I thought that I might start looking for that sort of connection in my present life then when I was reading it during this special time that I was reading this book. But I did really like it. And the fact that that doesn't continue, the fact that Marianne's journey is sort of cut short, and there's a lot of strange compromises made in the ending. I don't want to give anything away, but Marianne doesn't really end up following the romantic path that she had set before her. And I find that quite sad because it's almost as if Jane Austen is implying that the romantic marriage is not possible, or you can't be as too sensitive. You have to mature and become like Eleanor and reserve your feelings and your judgments to be calm and collected enough to afford a marriage. But I don't think that's necessarily the case, and I think it's a bit cynical to frame things in that way, which is what I hope her other stories do touch upon, that there isn't such this dichotomy between sense and sensibility, that you've got to be one way or the other for happiness to truly abound. So there are some issues I take from the messages you can take from this, but all that melts away when one sees this not so much as a story about marriage, but more about how sisterhood is more important, or at least a strong foundation for what a marriage could be, and that we help each other to get where we want to be. Everyone is searching for love, and it's through a process which is somewhat out of our control. A lot of things happen here the sisters can't control, but it's the one thing they can control is how they feel about themselves and the care that they give to each other. And I think that is a much more wonderful message, and that is a much more wonderful way of seeing this book. And when I see it like that, I really do like it. Even though I'm not a sister or a daughter, like, I think that's a cool thing to write about. That's a really nice message. I would highly recommend Sense and Sensibility to young readers, for people who are thinking about becoming adults one day and how to prepare themselves for being maybe one day loved and in love with someone. It's a cautionary tale about not falling in love too quickly, and to always remember that marriage is a financial and social situation as well as a romantic one. And so we got to be careful of who we fall in love with. So it's definitely good for those kinds of people. But for the romantic poets who do really like to live in the moment, carpe diem, like to seize the day, you're going to probably hit a wall here. If you're progressive in any way, you probably will hit a wall here, partly because of the context, how dated it is. The marital and dating norms here are very different here, but also the fact that Marianne isn't very realistically captured in this story. You feel like Jane Austen might be damning the romantic life. You'll feel like just reading a lot of Rilke's poetry or Rimbaud or some Patti Smith stories, because this is sort of against a poetic view of life. And that caught me off guard, because I was hoping for something romantic. You always hear that these are romantic stories, but they're really not. There's quite a cold, calculated way of dealing with relationships in these. But it's important, and it's good that this is said from this perspective. And it was definitely eye-opening to me to read this. But the thing I loved most about Austen is the precision of her language. I only hope that in her future works there's more of a rounded view of the romantic view of life, and that she doesn't drag as much as Dickens might in her plots, and that the women have at least a little bit more of an active role. I know that the times didn't really suit it too much, but I did really feel like these sisters were waiting for something to happen, and the story was almost about two girls who just couldn't get married. And I was just thinking, like, okay, why is this a story we're reading about? But you see that it's through their development, it's through their partnership, and it's how they continue on through that, which is the message here, and it is the literary fiction of the era that it was written in. And I see that it's important for that context. It's important to realize that the world was very different back then. And I do hope to read more of Jane Austen. I am wondering whether I'll read the Bronte sisters before her, but we'll see. Pride and Prejudice, Wuthering Heights. I downloaded a bunch of them on my Kindle, but this one took the first cake, and because it's chronological, I might continue, but I definitely need a genre change because I'm craving some action. I'm craving some brutal honesty, because this was a little impersonal for me. It's a little bit out of my comfort zone for that reason, but it was an enjoyable read. I'm very happy I did it. I always thought someone was going to force me to do it. I didn't think it'd be a Twitter comment section that suggested I do it. It wasn't the right time for me to read this, but it's done now. And I think I'll wait until I get a proper nudge to read another one of these. But I'm glad that I've done it. I'm glad that I know what this whole thing is about, that when I see people post about Jane Austen, I might sort of understand what's going on. But until then, I think I'll get back to reading my normal stuff, whatever that is. Who knows what I'm reading next? Probably just stuff for my book club. But anyways, that's it for now. That's my first Jane Austen novel. Thanks for watching. If you like this, do your thing, like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what other books I should read, or how I'm wrong or right, as you want. And yeah, see you around.